The Crimes Ireland podcast is intended for a mature audience.
Hello everyone, and welcome again to the Crimes Ireland podcast. And in this episode, it will follow the theme of some of the other episodes so far, where we will stick to cases in which the perpetrator has been executed at one of the Derry prisons or jails. This case is the murder of Lily Johnston by William Rooney. Please be advised that some of the descriptions and scenes in this episode are of a graphic/violent nature, so please do not listen if this may cause offence. If you have any questions or queries about the show, please send them to CrimesIreland@gmail.com. You can also use this email via PayPal to donate. Again, that's CrimesIreland@gmail.com. Cookstown in Northern Ireland is a town located very close to the centre of the province in the county of Tyrone. At the time of this case in 1922, the population of the town was very roughly between 2,000 and 5,000 people. This was after an almost quadrupling of peoples living there in and around 1840, when industrialisation was embraced greatly within the town. Any confident records of the population were very difficult to find for those decades, perhaps due to the turbulence of the Irish War of Independence raging about a year or so before. This war was said to have ran between the 21st of January 1919 and the 11th of July 1921. To save this episode being more of a history lesson than a true crime case, I will be brief about the history of Cookstown from here and speed up the timeline just a little bit. Previous to 1607, when King James I took land in the area, he mainly drove native landlords from the properties, and then he replaced them with landlords more loyal to himself. Some rebellions later devastated the land development for almost 100 years, until with habitation being sparse in and around 1734, it is said there was only 2 homes being permanently lived in at this time. One of the earlier developers was a William Stewart, and then later on his son. William, as far as I could tell, was an esquire of some sort. I'm not sure what this is. They started plans for a long and wide boulevard for the main street based on other such streets created by the dryly named Wide Streets Commission's work in and around Dublin. This street was laid fully by the mid-1740s, and it is still one of the longest main streets in all of Ireland to this day. Between then and the 1920s, Killyman Castle, which is local in the area, was rebuilt in 1802 after being destroyed by fire sometime much earlier. This cost around £80,000 then, which is almost £7.9 million or $10.5 million today. Other buildings constructed included the Gunnings Mill factory, 2 railway terminals, and also there was an IRA raid in the RAC barracks in 1920. Overall, the town prospered from the early 1800s onwards. Lily Johnston was a worker in the Gunnings Mill factory in Cookstown and was 21 years old at the time the crime was committed. She, like most mornings, left the home in which she shared with her mother and co. a few miles away to her job for the day just before 7 a.m. and was said to be in good spirits by her mother. She began to make the 3-mile trip to her work, passing over Kidd's Bridge, a local landmark, on her way. By coincidence, her Aunt Martha, who lived quite close, was planning to head out to the town that morning herself, and she had started out at approximately 8 a.m. She had to also cross Kidd's Bridge shortly after her niece, possibly not hearing much before or while crossing because of the noise of the stream. When she had crossed, she could see in the distance a man in the field with a woman. To Martha, it looked like the man was shouting at the woman and pushing her occasionally. Because of the distance, she couldn't make out who it was for certain. After passing it, and with the back to the field, she described hearing noises which she thought were kicks. How would Martha know the sounds were actually kicks? Instinctively, I'm assuming. I'm not sure exactly. Despite this, she did not turn back to insert herself into the situation by interfering and continued on, walking into Cookstown. Just before she had arrived there, on the outskirts, she met some workmen on the road and told them what she had seen. They went immediately to check on the incident and see if they could help in any way. Meanwhile, and about at the same time, another person, a local man called Patrick Devlin, also saw a man in the same field Martha had, with the woman still being kicked. This witness said later that he had known this person in the field kicking the woman for the last 10 years, and he had said that he had instantly recognised the man as William Rooney, and that the only two people he could see in the field was William and Miss Johnston. William Rooney was described at the time as a man in his 40s, a man of the labouring class, of quote, stalwart build, dark complexion, and with a well-trimmed moustache. He wore on that day a brown coat with navy trousers and had been reported to be drinking some sort of methylated spirit. This would be known to most in this local community as white spirit. Also reported about him at the time was that he was, quote, bareheaded, which I couldn't really understand, even with searches online, until I found old newspaper articles and other literature stating that he actually had been in custody that day on a trivial charge and had escaped. He had left his hat behind at the time, and so this could be the reason that he had none on during the attack. Basically just saying that he didn't have a hat on when the witness saw him. Another report writes that Samuel Nelson was cycling past the same field when he too saw Rooney. A fourth witness, called Nellie Mackenzie, reported seeing him and stated that it was around 9 a.m. and about half a mile from the field. He happily said good morning to her in passing. Nellie felt that Mr. Rooney could have been waiting for someone. Then he began to wait about as if whistling for a dog, and she continued on. He had no dog. Later on that day, Rooney was seen washing his clothes in a nearby stream. When he was arrested and later examined, these clothes showed signs of human blood. How they could tell this, I am unsure, but would assume they looked for dark stains and other things of the like. Later again, the next time Nellie Johnston's mother would see her would be, gut-wrenchingly, to identify her body and also an item of clothing, a muffler scarf. Sometime later, when the trial began at the Winter Assizes in Belfast, the prosecution told the court of pieces of medical evidence which made clear the extent of the victim's injuries. Just before this, though, one of the jury had, quote, a genuine religious and conscientious objection to the capital punishment, and he was accordingly released from service. Lily's face showed several wounds, including lacerations above the left eyebrow and another on the right side of her head and face. Her upper body was very badly bruised and had contusions. Her neck indicated choking because of bruising on the neck, and this was said to be a possible cause of death. The court also heard testaments from some of the witnesses, some of which I mentioned above. One of the witnesses was Rooney himself, who alleged just after his arrest he was beaten by revolvers and other things by the police. He was quoted as saying at one point he thought he would be killed. The woman who had seen part of the assault, Martha Johnston, had stated she had heard the woman being assaulted, and she cried out, quote, God save me. And Devlin, the other witness, stated he did not see but heard the thuds of what he later thought was kicks also. At another stage of the trial, William Rooney said, quote, All I have to say is that I'm innocent of the charge. It is perjury that has been sworn against me, and, as for the blood on my clothes, that is my own blood since 1921. Perhaps this was a way that they knew that the blood on the clothes earlier was in fact blood. He had also said, quote, "I never knew the girl in his life." Once a statement was made, the judge basically ignored this and said he wasn't interested and continued on with the proceedings. In all, the trial lasted only 2 days, and after a very, very short 25 minutes, the jury returned a guilty verdict. William Rooney was executed by hanging for the murder of Lily Johnston. This hanging was carried out at Derry Prison on the stroke of 8 a.m. on the 8th of February 1923. He had his hands fastened behind his back and was led from his cell to the scaffold. And, as was statutory at the time, the convicted man's body must sit for 1 hour after the noted time of death. It was then taken down and placed within a rough coffin. This was kept, as far as I could find, under a hospital. Whether it was a prison hospital or just a normal city hospital, I could not find out. Later, it was retrieved again and brought onto a platform so the jury could view it during a later inquest. After all this was completed, William Rooney was interred in a location within the prison grounds. In 1923, there had only been 3 executions in Derry during the last 100 years, Rooney's being the first since 1908. That being the topic of our first episode, John Berryman. He was hanged there on the 24th of August, 1908. Going on from there, the earliest now was John McQuaid, John Rainey and Robert Atchison, who were members of a gang of highwaymen robbing travellers in and around 1819/1820. They were hanged in front of the Bishop Street Jail during building works at the time. John Boyle was executed in January 1893 after killing his wife, and Joseph Mohan, the Chullick murderer, was executed on the 5th of January 1904. Thank you all again for listening to the Crimes Ireland podcast. If you have any queries about this episode or the show in general, you can send them to CrimesIreland@gmail.com. You can also use this email to donate to the show to keep it going. You can do this via PayPal to CrimesIreland@gmail.com. Thank you very much. Until the next one, goodbye.